For Clyn Scales, life was anything but easy for her family. Growing up with her mother and two brothers in Kansas City, Missouri in the 90s, the family were constantly struggling just to make ends meet. Her mother worked hard to provide for the family, but it never seemed to be enough. Thankfully, there was one moment in Clyn's day that always brought her joy: the opportunity to wave at her favorite police officer who patrolled their street on a daily basis. In that single moment, Clyn could forget her struggles and feel appreciated. However, one day, everything changed. One afternoon, the police officer waited for Clyn for their routine greeting, but she never arrived. It was the first time she missed their daily appointment, and he immediately knew something was terribly wrong. You won't believe what happens. The Scales family was struggling. At only 9 years old, Clyn watched as her mother did everything she could to provide for the family. But in the end, it simply wasn't enough. It always seemed like the world was against them, and every time they took one step forward, they would be forced to take another 3 steps back. It didn't help that they were also living in a very tough neighborhood in Kansas City. Violence was an everyday norm, and drugs were sold regularly on the streets. It was a tough place to live, and not the best situation for a young girl to grow up in. Money was also a constant problem. Bills were piling up left and right, and keeping food on the table regularly was hit or miss. There were many nights that Clyn had to go to bed hungry due to the lack of funds for a decent meal. It didn't help that her mother soon turned down a dark path. Tired of struggling, Clyn's mother turned to drugs, and the violence they had worked so hard to keep out of their home was suddenly infecting it. Clyn found herself having to be the light for her brothers, transforming into a mother and caregiver. Thankfully, despite the despair and sadness, Clyn was able to find solace in one person. It was someone she never expected to care, given the area she lived in and her upbringing. But it was a welcome surprise that would make an impact on her life. For Officer Jeff Colvin, patrolling the neighborhoods of Kansas City was a routine he had grown accustomed to. The area he worked was known for its shady business dealings and high crime rate, which meant Colvin had to stay hyper alert during his patrols. He never knew what unexpected situation he could find himself in. One day, Colvin noticed a young girl in the neighborhood he patrolled. He smiled at her, and he noticed her eyes lit up with a grin. She waved back. It was a simple gesture, but Colvin knew the kids living in the area had it tough. However, he never imagined that one wave would turn into something so much greater. Over the course of the next few weeks, Colvin and Clyn would meet in the same spot, and he would wave while she smiled. It became a daily routine for the girl and officer. One he had no idea brought her so much joy due to her troubled home life. As time continued to pass, Colvin and Clyn would begin to form a bond. They would talk about the weather, her day, as well as dreams, goals, and aspirations. However, there was a secret Clyn was keeping from him. Despite giving off the appearance of a happy little girl, Clyn was struggling. As her mother's condition and absence from her life grew, the young girl was forced to step up to the plate and become the adult in the family. Colvin had no idea how hard her life was. With her mother rarely home, Clyn had to make sure there was food to feed her two brothers. This led to her stealing food from the local 7-Eleven. Clyn knew that stealing was wrong, but what other choice did she have? There had been too many times she and her brothers went days without food, and she refused to let them go hungry. Officer Colvin was the one person in Clyn's life she could count on. Every day he would show up at their spot, and he became a role model and very important person in her life. However, one day everything changed. One sunny afternoon, Colvin arrived at the spot where he met Clyn to find her missing. She had never missed their routine get-togethers, and he was surprised that she would suddenly vanish. He'd grown quite fond of the girl and was worried something might have happened to her. Colvin decided to check on Clyn and drove over to her house. He had followed her once to make sure she had gotten home safely, so he knew exactly where it was. However, when he knocked on the door, nobody answered. But then he heard a moan followed by movement. While he wasn't in the habit of breaking into someone's home, Colvin had a terrible gut feeling that something was wrong. After making his way inside, he found Clyn lying on the floor, pale and shivering. He realized she was very sick and immediately called an ambulance. After being rushed to the hospital, Clint was diagnosed with severe malnourishment. According to the doctors, Colvin had saved her life by finding her because she wouldn't have lasted another day without treatment. Talk about being a guardian angel. Through all the bad situations, I would just picture him saying that he was there for us. And if we ever needed him, he would be right there, Clint would recall later. He would always protect us, so those words would come to me during the worst times of my childhood life. After Colvin saved Clint, she would end up moving out of the area. As the years passed, she never forgot the incredible kindness he had bestowed upon her when she was 9 years old. He had given her a second chance at life. He was that one person that I trusted in my life as a kid, Clint revealed, and after 20 years thinking about him, she knew she had to seek him out. Despite all the time that had passed, Clint wanted to thank him in person. Unfortunately, Clint had forgotten his name after all that time. Therefore, she logged onto Facebook and began to search the Kansas City Police Department's page, hoping she might catch a glimpse of him. Thankfully, she was able to reach out to Sergeant Jennifer Jones, who said she would reach out to Officer Colvin on her behalf. Jones emailed Colvin and told him that a woman claimed to be a little girl he had helped years ago and that she was looking for the officers she had waved to daily. Colvin remembered Clint and was shocked, to say the least. Colvin immediately knew who she was. Despite it being 20 years ago, he had thought of the girl often, wondering what had happened to her. I always wondered what became of her, Colvin told the local news. It was surprising to connect so many years later. After Colvin confirmed he knew the girl, Jones connected him directly with Clint. The now grown woman was ecstatic to have found the man who had made such a direct impact on her life. I just never thought that this would happen. To find my hero, she revealed. After meeting with Clint, Colvin was overwhelmed with emotion. Most times we go through our career not realizing we truly helped anybody out, he recalled. That was the case with me, where I wondered if I was even in the right career path. Thankfully, his relationship with Clint proved he had selected the right path. Clint revealed that Colvin saving her life had a major impact on her next steps in life. She was able to turn her life around, get her brothers away from her drug-addicted mother, and make a life for herself. Now she was planning to become a police officer, hoping to make the same impact on someone else like Colvin did for her. After meeting with Colvin, Clint shared her story on social media, and it immediately went viral, garnering a ton of support for her and Colvin. People were impressed by Colvin's selflessness and kindness while praising Clint for rising above her circumstances. Jeff Colvin is not just a hero to me, but my guardian angel also. He was there when I had no one. I want him and every police officer to know that what you do, no matter how big or small, can make a positive impact in someone's life, like it did mine. We imagine that Clint is going to go on and do amazing things. It's amazing how much of an impact a simple smile and a wave can make.